Hello everyone, back tuning in to today's video, doing GWV Sunday Round-Up for today's video. So it's going to be your usual eclectic Sunday afternoon mix of this and that. We're going to have a look at things like activity, sea surface temperature, anomalies, what's happening with ENSO. We'll have a look at some of the indexes like the QBO and the AO and the NAO. And of course have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days as well. Not going to be too many more Sunday Roundups now. After this week, there's only got 3 more to go, and then they get put on the back burner as we go into the winter updates. First winter update will be released on the first Sunday of September, which actually this year is the 1st of September. So after this week, we've only got 3 more GWV Sunday Roundups to do, and then they'll be put on the back burner until probably the start of next year in favour of the winter updates. So I'll get on with that for you very shortly. Just to say that we was hoping to bring you Solar Sunday this week, a final Solar Sunday for this year. We haven't been able to bring that to you, but we are going to have quite a long section actually within GWV Sunday Roundup today about solar activity, so we'll get on that for you. Right now, we're going to start off having a look at the solar disk. So this is how things are looking on the solar disk on our side of this today from solarham.net, and we have a completely spotless solar disk, no sunspots whatsoever. How often are we saying that at the moment? So therefore solar activity is at very low levels, and it's forecast to remain at very low levels for the next 3 days as well. The spotless disk continues. This is the GWV Sunday Roundup solar activity tracker, updated by good friend James Ackwill up to yesterday, 3rd of August. This is how things are looking, and we are at a very, very minimal level of solar activity now. So we come down here, you can see that the orange line is depicting each individual day's sunspots, and that's basically now flatlining. We have got the odd day with 1 or 2 sunspots still appearing occasionally, but really since May we've been flatlining with this orange line generally. So we have had many days since May now have not had any sunspots. More about that in a moment. And also the trend lines are the thick green and thick red lines. There are trend lines, and they're pretty much on the floor of the chart, particularly this red line. So it just again tells us that we are now into solar minimum. I think we can say pretty definitively that we have entered into the solar minimum of solar cycle number 24. We don't know when we will come out of solar minimum and go into the new solar cycle, so cycle number 25. We won't know when it's when it's going to happen until it's happened. It's probably going to be sometime in the next 6-9 months perhaps, so maybe sort of towards the end of this year. It might be early next year. I would tend to go more with it being early next year, maybe around the late winter or early spring, February, March, April of next year, that sort of time. But we shall see. But what we can say very, very definitively is that we are now at a very, very low level of solar activity, obviously with many days not having any sunspots at all. You can see how this has dropped out since May. So if we go further back into a chart, we was at a minimum level of activity even going back here into the end of last year, but we was still getting fairly regular sunspot days, even though they was at a low level. But you can see how this has really, really dropped out now since May during this part of the tracker just there. You can see just how solar activity and sunspots have really dropped out over the past 3 months or so. Reason we look at solar activity is because there is a connection between being at weak levels of, or having weak levels of solar activity, being within solar minimum, and having an increased chance of northern blocking. So it's interesting that we have had a lot of blocking during this summer. In particular, maybe there is a connection there, although again, you can't definitively say one thing is leading to another thing, but we know that around solar minimum, the increase of blocking increases, particularly so in the winter. So there is a connection with low levels of solar activity being around or just after solar minimum. Often it's within the first 2 or 3 winters of a new solar cycle, actually, where you get an increased chance of northern blocking during winters and colder winters. So that's the reason we keep a very close eye on solar activity. And obviously you'll be seeing a lot more of the solar activity tracker as we go into the winter updates. This has been sent through by our good friend Richard Short. So this is telling us that 72 of the last 78 days have been spotless since May the 19th. That means we are well into solar minimum, as that's 92.3% spotless days since May. So again, it just backs up what we were saying within the tracker, that since May particularly, we have seen over the past 3 months a real dropout in solar activity. We was already at a low level of solar activity anyway, but since May, I think that's when we definitively shifted into solar minimum. And this is showing the stretch of spotless days. So the current stretch is 11, but of course, generally we have had vast amounts of spotlessness going right the way back into May. So the past 3 months, most days have tended not to have any sunspots. For 2019 so far, we've had 143 days without sunspots. That is 66.5% of the year, compared to 2018, where we had 221 days without any sunspots. That's 61% of the year. So there's been more days without sunspots in terms of percentage this year than last year. Of course, we've still got some months to go for 2019. It's only a few years ago that all days had sunspots. So going back to 2015 just here, we can see that in 2015, every single day had sunspots. There wasn't a single day in 2015 that didn't have that didn't have any sunspots. And in 2014, only one day that didn't have any sunspots. 2013, again, no days without sunspots. 2012, no days without sunspots. So obviously that's around the peak of the solar cycle. That's around solar max. We had 2 peaks, remember, for this solar cycle. One in 2011. The first peak was in 2011, and then the second peak happened at the beginning of 2014. The second peak was bigger than the first peak for this solar cycle, which is quite unusual. Normally, it's the first peak that is that's the maximum of the solar cycle. So all the way along, this solar cycle has been very different to solar cycle number 24. Has been a strange solar cycle. We had a long solar minimum going from solar cycle 23 to solar cycle 24. Long solar minimum, and then the maximum was very weak. It's the weakest solar cycle for 100 years, and it's possible that the next solar cycle, number 25, will be even weaker. This was something that we could talk about in Solar Sunday, but as I say, unfortunately we couldn't bring you Solar Sunday this time, but we was going to talk about this again. We spoke about this in the last Solar Sunday, but we did a couple of months ago. This is the NASA forecast. NASA is forecasting that solar cycle number 25 will be the weakest solar cycle for 200 years. Now, there is a lot of variance. There are other forecasts out there that are not going anywhere near to that extent of weakness with solar cycle number 25. Other forecasts for this solar cycle are going for a much stronger cycle. It's always very, very difficult to forecast solar activity. But this is how it looks within this graph of all solar cycles, going back to number 1 over here around 1700, and of course this is the forecast for solar cycle number 25. If the NASA forecast is correct, then you can see that it's a lot weaker, this solar cycle, than number 24, which was already a very weak solar cycle. Remember, solar cycle number 24 was or has been the weakest solar cycle for 100 years, going back, I think it's to number 14, that one just there at the start of the 20th century. So it's already been a very weak solar cycle, but if the NASA forecast is correct, then it peaks around here, and that is the weakest solar cycle that we've had since the 2 Dalton minimum solar cycles of number 5 and number 6 back at the beginning of the 1800s. And that's a very cold time, of course, within the UK's weather history. Lots of severe winters were contained within that. So we can't obviously say that we're going to get those level of winters that we had during the Dalton minimum during solar cycle number 25, if it's as weak as NASA is forecasting. But that's how it looks anyway on the graph of all solar cycles. So it would be one of the weakest solar cycles actually that we've ever had if it's correct, if the forecast from NASA is correct. We are down there at Dalton minimum solar cycles 5 and 6 type levels with this, which is going to be very, very interesting to see how that plays out in terms of what effects it would have on the weather, and particularly on our winters across the UK and Northern Europe. But remember, there are other forecasts that are not going to that extent with solar cycle number 25. But there are other forecasts that are out there that are going for a stronger solar cycle, albeit not a particularly strong solar cycle. But there are other forecasts that are keeping things around the sort of level of solar cycle number 24. So we shall see how it all plays out. I suspect one thing that will tell us if we are going to have a really weak solar cycle with number 25 is that we'll have a very prolonged solar minimum. So what I was just saying a few minutes ago about we'll begin solar cycle 25 sort of early next year, kind of February, March, April next year. If we are going to have a Dalton minimum type solar cycle with number 25, I would suspect that solar cycle 25 probably won't begin until much later next year. So that will tell us, I would have thought, whether we're going to have a normal solar cycle, whether we're going to have something much more unusual. Because if we have a much weaker solar cycle, we are likely to have a very delayed a very delayed solar minimum. So we shall see. Big thank you to James and Richard for their input on this part of the video. And yeah, so we've covered a little bit of the stuff that we're going to talk about in Solar Sunday. Anyway, I hope you found that part of the video interesting. Let's move on to the oceans. This is how things were looking with the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans last week. We did last week's GWV Sunday Round-Up. So we've got 3 areas of interest. We've got the equatorial Pacific Ocean just here. We've got the northern Pacific Ocean up there, and of course we've got the Atlantic Ocean over here. That's how the oceans were looking last week. Let's look at the very latest. So this is it. In terms of the ENSO region, I think the eastern part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean has seen a further slight reduction in sea surface temperature anomalies. So we've still got this signature of potentially a cold event, a La Nina, beginning to gather across the eastern part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. It isn't yet pushing into the central and western part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, that area just there, but gradually, week by week, we are seeing the sea surface temperature anomalies cooling down in this eastern part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, and it of course ties back to all of this these cold and average sea surface temperature anomalies that we have here off the coast of Chile and stretching out into the southern Pacific Ocean. So when you get those colder than average sea surface temperature anomalies gathering there, it can often be a precursor to a La Nina, to a cold event. And we're beginning to see that gathering in the eastern part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean at the moment. Hasn't yet got into the central part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. Further northwards in the northern Pacific, very much warmer than average sea surface temperature anomalies up here. If you go back to last week, very little change on the situation last week. It's about as warm as it can get, really, with the sea surface temperature anomalies up there. So remains very warm there. In the Atlantic Ocean, it continues to get warmer to the south of Greenland. We really do have very, very extensive warmer than average SSTs to the south of Greenland. Now much warmer than average there. I think that's about the warmest it's been to the south of Greenland in the summer since 2012 now. 2014 was to some degree, but I think we've passed 2014. I think that's the warmest it's been now since 2012 in that area. Also much warmer than average in the Norwegian Sea. We've got a colder area sitting underneath that area of warm sea surface temperature anomaly, so it's colder there. And then we go down into the tropical Atlantic where it is looking relatively warm too. So we still have a tripole signature. It's not a classic tripole because this colder than average area should be a bit bigger than that, and it should extend more towards the eastern seaboard of the United States around there. So for a classic tripole, that's perfect. You want this colder than average area of sea surface temperature anomalies to be doing something a bit like that. Let's get rid of that and do that again. So that's perfect just there. This cold average area needs to be more expansive and stretched over towards the eastern seaboard of the United States, and then down here that's where you want it to be warmer than average. That will be a perfect tripole signature. It's not far from it, and it is a kind of a tripole signature. We may of course see that developing more towards a tripole as we get closer to the winter, but yeah, those warm and average sea surface temperature anomalies to the south of Greenland really are very, very impressive now, and it's something we haven't seen. As I say, I don't think we've seen the sea surface temperature anomalies as warm as that south of Greenland in the summer since 2012. That was a very, very wet and very disturbed summer, of course, in 2012. So maybe the deterioration that we've got coming in the weather, and I will come on to that in a few minutes, the deterioration we've got coming in the weather during August, possibly to be expected. This is the SOI, Southern Oscillation Index. So this is an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state in the Southern Ocean. It's measuring the air pressures between Darwin in Australia and Tahiti. So when the SOI is in its negative phase, the atmospheric setup will be reflective of El Nino. When the SOI is in its positive phase, the atmospheric setup will be reflective of La Nina. Now, for a few days at the end of July, the SOI actually shifted more positive. So around the 26th, 27th of July, we got +5 and +6. And then on the 29th of July, we got +9. 30th of July also at +9. So those are positive numbers. They are telling us that the atmospheric state then was beginning to move into more of a La Nina type setup, but the last few days have actually gone negative again. So the first days of August, early August, we see the first day, 1st of August going down to -7, 2nd of August going down to -14, 3rd of August going down to -18, and the 4th of August goes down to -11. So that's the atmospheric state, again swinging back into an El Nino type setup. So at the moment, the atmosphere certainly hasn't shifted into La Nina. The atmospheric setup is still really reflective of El Nino on most days. The SOI is telling us that. So at the minute, we've got the ocean seemingly wanting to shift more towards the La Nina type signal, but the atmosphere wants to maintain the El Nino type atmospheric setup. So the ocean and the atmosphere are kind of in conflict with one another. It will be interesting to see over the next few weeks how that resolves itself. The QBO is in for July, so the quasi-biennial oscillation is an index that's reflecting the strength of the zonal westerlies. When you're in a westerly QBO phase, the zonal westerlies will be powered up. You can have stronger zonal westerlies. When the QBO is in its easterly phase, the zonal westerlies will be weakened. Particularly something that is important during the winter, because if you're in a westerly QBO, obviously if the zonal westerlies are strengthened, then you have an increased chance of a milder Atlantic-driven westerly winter. If the zonal westerlies, however, are weakened, then you have a greater chance in the winter of getting easterlies, of getting northern blocking. It's not as simple as that, though, nowhere near, because there have been westerly QBO winters that have been cold, and there have been many easterly QBO winters that have been mild. Anyway, we scroll down to 2019 and we can see that we begin the year with a strengthening westerly QBO. So the westerly QBO actually began at the end of last year. November was the first month that went into the westerly QBO at plus 3.36. Obviously, westerly QBOs on this chart indicated by positive numbers, easterly QBOs indicated by the negative numbers. So the first westerly QBO month was November. That powers up through December and then on into January, February, March, all increasing westerly QBO months. We arrive at the summer months, so that's April there, that's May, and that's June, and we go from plus 13.36 to plus 14.59 to plus 14.36. Quite strong westerly QBO numbers. The very latest for July is plus 10.96, this number just here. Quite important that, because it is fairly a fair drop actually from May and June. So we have May and June at plus 14, both of those months at plus 14, and then go down to plus 10 in July. That could well be an indication that the westerly QBO has peaked and is now starting to weaken. Not, of course, reversing into the easterly QBO yet, but weakening from now onwards until we get towards the end of the year when the easterly QBO may begin. So it looks as though, you never totally guarantee this, but it looks as though the westerly QBO may have peaked just here at plus 14.59. In May 2019 could have been the peak of the westerly QBO, which would be quite early within this westerly QBO from where it started in November. So an early peak to westerly QBO and a sort of early weakening of the westerly QBO may lead us to an early transition from the westerly to the easterly QBO, which would be an important factor within the winter updates. Of course, we'll talk much more about this in the winter updates, but it could be an important factor. It's looking kind of like what happened in 1995. Here's the year of 1995 just here. Actually, that's 1996. There's 1995, just there. So that one, again, we have the powering up of the westerly QBO at the end of 1994 into the early part of 1995. The peak there occurs at plus 15.62, just there. So that's going to be a month of January, February, March, April, May. So that's June. The westerly QBO of 1995 peaked in June 1995. Quite a reduction from June to July 1995, plus 15 down to plus 11, and then carried on weakening through the end of the summer and into the autumn of 1995, going into the easterly phase of the QBO, going into ECQBO in November and December of 1995, and then continuing into 1996. That was a cold winter, of course, 1995, 1996, and it was a solar minimum, or very close to solar minimum, winter 2. All of this will be discussed much more in depth, of course, in the winter updates. Arctic oscillation observed and forecast looking like this. So the black line shows we've been with the Arctic oscillation. Red line showing the MO GFS Symbols forecasting Arctic oscillation to go. We've been negative with both the AO and the NAO for a long time now, going right way back into the spring. We have had negativity of both the indexes. That's where we are right now, still negative. GFS ensembles are really forecasting up to the middle part of August that we stay negative with the AO as well. There are a few ensemble members that are lifting up towards positive territory as we get towards the middle of August, but I mean, it's a long way out. It's in the unreliable time frame of the GFS and its ensembles. Reliably, within the reliable week to 10-day time frame, the AO is staying negative. This is an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state, so when the AO is negative, you've got blocking. This is telling us that we have had and continue to have considerable levels of northern blocking. Interesting, as I said, that has occurred during this summer around this solar minimum period, where we know blocking over the Arctic tends to increase. NAO as well, very similar. Black line shows where we've been with the NAO, which of course is very, very negative, going all the way back into the spring. Red lines at the end, where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the NAO to go. And again, within the reliable time frame, the week to 10-day time frame, GFS ensembles are keeping the NAO negative too. There are a few ensemble members, again, around the middle part of August that are taking us back to more positive territory, but it's a long way out. That's unreliable. And we have, of course, seen these little tick-ups before, both with the AO and the NEO, where they try to get themselves back. The atmosphere tries to get itself back into a positive setup. Remember, positive AO, NEO is the default setup, really, for the North Atlantic. And so it's going to keep, the atmosphere will keep trying to get itself back to that. But at the moment, certainly within the next week to 10 days, AO and NEO both staying very negative, which when we combine with those much warmer than average sea surface temperature anomalies to the south of Greenland, similar to what we had in 2012, may not be a particularly good sign for our weather prospects during August. So let's come on down and do a bit of forecasting. These are the GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles. Next couple of weeks on at Manchester today. The red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average for Manchester. Quite warm still, just about hanging on to the warmth for today, but after today temperatures are lowering, so it will start to feel much fresher from tonight onwards, really, and through to tomorrow. The coming week is going to be close to average with temperatures. A little bit of a tick up there. That's kind of like the beginning of the weekend, next weekend, but it is associated with a big area of low pressure, so how much of that temperature increase will feel remains to be seen. And then after that, it looks like it's getting cooler, actually, if anything, through to the middle part of August into the second half of the month. Then the GFS ensembles really are trending under average, so if anything, the signal is cooling with the upper air temperatures into the middle part of the month. Things going from bad to worse, perhaps. And the precipitation side of this, remember, this is for Manchester, so it is a pretty wet place at the best of times. But it does look very wet here. Regular precipitation spikes coming through. Got rain coming up today. Rain around the middle of the week. Very wet at the end of the week into next weekend. That's a big area of low pressure. And then after that, as we go towards the middle part of August, maybe the ensembles are getting even wetter then. It's possible they are. So around the middle part of August, things could be looking very, very bad indeed, turning increasingly wet, and the temperatures sliding too. This is not a very good ensemble for August, I have to say. It is a bit concerning for anyone who has holiday plans in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Temperature anomalies from the 4th to the 12th of August, now ever so slightly below average. It's not a big deviation, but it does look as though we are shifting from being on the warmer side of average to possibly being on the slightly cooler side of average for the UK. And for Ireland, precipitation anomalies from the 4th to the 12th of August, a little bit wetter than average. So relatively cool, relatively wet in the week ahead. Over in America, the east-west split that we had all summer continues. Eastern parts of the states have a cooler than average temperature anomaly generally. Western parts of the states much warmer than average. Precipitation anomalies in America varying from state to state. The northeast looks generally quite dry, as does this Pacific western side, especially around California. In between looks a little bit more unsettled there. This is how the GFS is looking for Wednesday. Then low pressure is in control of the weather on Wednesday, sitting over Scotland. That will bring showers, if not longer spells of rain. Thursday could be a drier day, but then watch out for this area of low pressure developing around the Bay of Biscay into the west of Biscay on Friday. That heads northwards and potentially becomes quite a major area of low pressure from Friday through to Saturday. That's that little tick up in the upper air temperatures I showed you on the ensemble graph of Manchester. But of course it's associated with quite a lot of rain, so this is particularly focused on England and Wales as well, giving a lot of wet weather. from Friday through to Saturday. Low pressure gets out of the way by Sunday. This time next week, we're into a showery, cool northwesterly. More low pressures driving in from off the Atlantic up to day 10, which is Wednesday, 14th of August. Looks very unsettled. And even into the second half of the month, look at this, another really deep area of low pressure there, moving in from the Atlantic on Friday, the 16th of August. This is the Atlantic back in business big time. Atlantic unleashed here with the GFS midnight run. Just continuous areas of low pressure, bringing very cool and very unsettled conditions even into the second half of the month. That's as far as we get to today with the GFS, which is Tuesday the 20th of August. Looks very unsettled, very disturbed, dare I say it, a bit autumnal. By next weekend, by the way, the GFS will be extending out into the late summer bank holiday weekend. So updates for the late August bank holiday will begin at Galsworth's. I think it'll be next weekend. Not sure if it'll be Saturday or Sunday, but not long to go now before we start doing updates for the late summer bank holiday weekend. The 5-day accumulated precipitation chart for Weather Outlook based on that GFS run looks like this. So still relatively dry in the extreme southeastern part of the country, very little rain there, but most places having between around 20 and 40 millimetres of rain in the next 5 days. So pretty wet in the next 5 days, but the 10 days increase that even more. So particularly northern parts of the country, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, almost sort of 75 to 100 millimetres there in a lot of places. Not as wet as that for the rest of England and Wales, but most parts of England and Wales sort of 30 to 50 millimetres in the next 10 days. And even in the southeast, there's a little bit of rain coming through about 25 millimetres. That's an inch of rain in that far southeastern corner. So clearly it is getting more and more unsettled as we're going further along. GEM looks like that. Low pressure over Scotland on Wednesday. That gets out of the way. The next low heads in off the Atlantic from Friday through to Saturday. That could bring a real soaking at the end of the week and into next weekend. That low clears way to the North Sea by Monday the 12th of August and be turning the wind into the north. So that's the drop in temperature that then comes through to the middle part of the month. And up to day 10, the GEM is also looking very unsettled and very disturbed. ECMWF, again, there's that low over Scotland on Wednesday. That will bring showers and longer spells of rain. Here comes the low at the end of the week and into next weekend. This is midnight on Saturday. Low pressure moving in from the Atlantic. That will bring a real soaking with it, probably some parts of the country. Sunday, that low pressure is moving away to the east of Scotland in a week's time. That starts pulling much cooler winds from the North Atlantic. So that's the drop in temperature that we saw on the ensemble graph. Another low pressure driving in there on Tuesday the 13th of August, heading up towards day 10. The lows just keep coming. That could be another real rainmaker. We finish up at day 10, Wednesday 14th of August, pulling down a cool northerly wind, and the lows clearing away, but I expect we've got more downstream in the Atlantic around here, possibly threatening to keep this Atlantic onslaught going. I think I said in last week's Sunday Roundup that we have been very lucky really this summer not to have been a lot more unsettled. The heat that we have managed to pull off this summer, if you like it of course, a lot of people don't like hot weather, but the heat that we've managed to pull off this summer within a negative AO and NAO summer with a lot of northern blocking, that is very, very unusual to do that. So I think this Atlantic attack, this Atlantic onslaught with the southerly tracking jet stream and areas of low pressure has been threatening all summer. We did get it a little bit in the second week of June, but I think this has been threatening to happen. So I'm not overly surprised that it's going this way, really. With the way we've got those warmer than average sea surface temperature anomalies to the south of Greenland, combined with the northern blocking, the negative AO-NAO combination, I think it can't really be a surprise that we're going in this direction, and we could be in for a little bit of an onslaught from the Atlantic in the next week or two. This is how the ECMWF precipitation forecast looks based on that ECM run we were just talking about. So today, rain into Scotland. This is from tameteo.com. Rain into Scotland and showers breaking out more widely across the country through the course of today. Some of those could be a little bit thundery. Into tomorrow and then through to Tuesday and Wednesday, lots of showers, especially focusing on the northwest. Not too many showers in the south and the southeast, you'll notice. But even there are showers coming through around the middle part of the week. Thursday is a rather drier day, perhaps. And then on Friday through to Saturday, here comes all of this wet weather. Friday through to Saturday, lots of very heavy rain. Again, extreme southeast corner, not too much rain getting through there, but most places having a real soaking at the end of the week and into next weekend. And then we move on into the early part of next week, and here comes that next low heading in off the Atlantic around the 13th of August. That brings a soaking, particularly to England and Wales. Really wet weather there, and that's how we look at today. 10, still lots of heavy rain, this time even down into the southeast. So clearly rain is going to be increasing issue over the next week or two. So the CFS V2 is looking for the next 4 weeks. So these are 500 millibar heights broken down into week periods. The first week period takes us from the 4th to the 10th of August. The coming week, low pressure in off the Atlantic. Lots of northern blocking up there too. Jet stream coming through like that. So it looks pretty unsettled in the week ahead. Go through to week 2, which is the 11th to the 17th of August. Raising heights across southern Europe. So that's going to try and pull heat out of North Africa, but it'll probably go in that direction over towards the Balkans and then towards Black Sea. We remain rather flat with low pressure to our north, bringing jet stream through like that, so rather westerly and quite unsettled. We go through to week 3, which is the 18th to 24th of August. Again, below average heights up to our north, bringing through westerlies like that, generally quite unsettled. And even to week 4, which is the 25th to the 31st of August, low pressures out to our west, high pressure is to our north, so blocking still sitting there to the north in the Norwegian Sea, sending the jet stream southwards, so it looks unsettled and quite cool then. This is how September is looking with CFS V2 in terms of a 700 millibar height anomaly. At the moment, it has an area of above average heights out in the middle of the Atlantic and also across northeastern parts of Europe. There's no trough of below average heights showing up on this chart today, but you would expect within those, between those two ridges, you would probably expect low pressure to be coming through here with the jet stream doing something a little bit like that. So that could actually be rather cooler and rather more unsettled scenario for September than is at first apparent. The temperature anomaly is holding up just a little bit above average for September with CFS at the moment. Precipitation anomaly, no particular signal. But that 700 millibar height anomaly does imply, I would have thought, that a trough is likely to be coming through there with jet stream. So pretty unsettled potential for September. Finally, there is a chance of some heavy showers breaking out this afternoon. Don't think we'll do storm watch. I don't think it's quite enough here to warrant a storm watch today, but there could be some heavy thundery showers this afternoon, particularly across parts of northern eastern England perhaps, and also into parts of Midlands. This is Euro 4 weather online. So yeah, it could be some downpours this afternoon. Watch out for those. Don't be overly surprised if you hear some rumbles of thunder and see some flashes of lightning. That's how Euro 4 is looking. This is how the WRF at Metro Seal is looking. So again, we have these showers breaking out more widely with WRF. We saw that in yesterday's videos, particularly across northern England, Wales and the Midlands, more widely with those showers and potential thunderstorms this afternoon. They clear off northwards overnight, get out of the way, and then we bring in an area of more general rain from the Atlantic. That will freshen things up as well as it pushes through overnight into tomorrow. And then into Tuesday, we've got showers breaking out particularly across northern and western parts of the country. They do get through some eastern areas too. And of course, from there, it just gets more and more unsettled. Right, that's it for your Sunday round. It's been a very, very extended one, nearly 40 minutes. Hope we managed to make up at the start of the video for not being able to bring you solar sunny. Hope you enjoyed that look at solar activity. And hope you enjoyed the rest of the GWV Sunday Roundup. So now this one's done. We've only got 3 more GWV Sunday Roundups to go, and then they will be put onto the back burner in favour of the winter updates, which will be starting 4 weeks today on Sunday, the 1st of September, and we'll do a winter update every Sunday from the 1st of September throughout the rest of the autumn until we arrive at the winter forecast, which will be released at the beginning of December. Right, but at 14 minutes, that's it for this week's GWV Sunday Roundup, and thanks for watching.